Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Legend Lore. I figured it was high time we branched out from talking about just monsters on this channel. After all, there are so many different things to explore in the world of Dungeons & Dragons. So, what is this series exactly? I'm glad you asked. Basically, it's just an excuse for me to share some of the most fascinating, hilarious, and truly bizarre lore from the various worlds of D&D with you. Maybe you'll find some of it inspiring and apply it to your own RPG worlds and characters. Or maybe you'll just put these videos on as something to do while you do your homework. But whatever brought you here, I hope you sincerely enjoy these tales from around the multiverse, because some of this stuff is buck wild. To get us kicked off on this journey of discovery through the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, I want to start off by telling you a story that is near and dear to my heart. It's a story of devotion, revenge, and total chaos. Today, we're going to be talking about an event that went down in history to be known as the Night of 14 Magisters. It's impossible to talk about this night without first talking about Mystra. For those who don't know, Mystra is the major goddess of magic in Faerun. Her domains include magic, spells, the weave, and posting thirst traps to Twitter. She has a bunch of absolutely wild magic powers and a whole slew of different titles that all are essentially some version of Magic Lady. As a lawful neutral goddess of the arcane, her sole purpose and desire is to see the use of magic spread throughout the world. She also wants to see that the laws of magic are upheld. If you've ever wondered why spells only go up to level 9, you can thank Mystra for that one, because she deemed that level 10 spells and above were too much for mortals to handle. And that's not even a joke. Like an overzealous MTG judge, she instituted a law called Mystra's Ban that prevents, on a cosmic scale, any mortals from casting spells that are above level 9. But that's a story for another time. The only reason I say all this, and it's all very important to understand, is because Mystra's mortal agents all follow a very peculiar structure of organization. I mean, of course, she has churches and worshippers, clerics and acolytes, all arranged in what is essentially a Ponzi scheme like any good deity does. But sitting atop all that is a single individual that Mystra has chosen to be her Magister. Basically, the Magister is like the Pope of Mystra's following if he could fly around and shoot fireballs using magic. As Mystra's chosen representative, the Magister is responsible for practicing and spreading the use of magic in all its forms. As a lawful neutral faith, ethics and morality don't really get in the way of this goal. It doesn't really matter what magic is being used for, so long as it's being used for something that will likely propagate the use of magic even further. If, for example, the Magister were to construct an academy in the center of a large city that was dedicated to teaching magic to as many people as possible, that would be seen as an objectively good outcome to Mystra. Whether those students go on to commit war crimes in the name of a king using magic or help underprivileged youth with their magical abilities doesn't really matter to her. The other thing that's really important to understand about the Magister and their position is that the way succession is determined is absolutely insane. And by insane, I mean, it's basically just Afro Samurai rules. If you're the Magister, at any time, somebody can challenge you to a duel. You must accept the duel or forfeit, and because of the volatile nature surrounding magic, especially at a high level, the outcome of this duel is usually death. As you can imagine, that makes the life of your typical Magister a pretty lonely one. They basically spend all their days working towards whatever arcane project they're set on, with the understanding that at any moment, some rival magic user might pop out and try to send them straight to the Shadow Realm. Also, just to make it clear, there is only ever one Magister at a time, barring extraneous circumstances, but we'll get into that in a minute. Knowing all of that and understanding what we now understand, the fact that there was an event called the Night of 14 Magisters should be raising so many red flags. And with all of that established, let's now move on to the point in the video where I tell you the tale of how the title of Magister passed hands 14 times in a single night. The year in Faerun is 709 DR. Almer Galerthand is the current Magister, and Almer is a secretive individual. He travels a lot, and he travels in disguise, not afraid to strike first against any mage that gets too close, fearing they're after his title and powers. I feel like it goes without saying, but the Magister gets some pretty sweet extra magic powers. Meanwhile, in the nation of Calamishan, in the city of Calamport, the Archmage Zunrun Iber is crafting a scheme. He is already an exceptional wizard, and has decided that the next step on his journey to arcane mastery is to become the Magister. So he scries on Almer for months, probing for weakness, and eventually he finds it. He learns that one of Almer's favorite spots to stop and visit is a little inn in northern Calamishan known as the Vizier Vanquished. On Eliassus 4, the 217th day of the year, Almer goes into the inn as usual, not knowing that what is about to transpire will go down in history. In anticipation of Almer's arrival, the Archmage Zunrun, in conjunction with his 3 assistants, makes 12 fully functioning clones of himself. Creating 12 clones of yourself is a monumental task, and the sheer amount of arcane energy summoned to do this knocks Zunrun unconscious and kills 2 of his 3 assistants. But the ritual is a success and the clones are created, all born with the directive implanted in their mind to hunt and kill Almer. The clones arrive at the inn. Almer is none the wiser, and they all strike at once. During the ensuing battle, Almer manages to kill off 3 of the clones, but is ultimately slain by them. And what happens next is truly one of the funniest things to ever transpire in a canon D&D setting. All 9 of the clones suddenly become the Magister. Since they are all technically the same person, the Magister's power is granted to all of them, as well as the unconscious Archmage. But these clones were not constructed to house such power, so this sudden influx of Magister juice makes them all go mad, and suddenly they start throwing spells at one another, trying to kill each other in a frenzy that also destroys the inn in the process. Meanwhile, back in Zunrun's wizard tower, someone finally regains consciousness. But it's not Zunrun, it's the one of the 3 assistants that actually survived the arcane ritual. Ilinj Hardraw, which is presumably his legal name, wakes up to see the other 2 assistants dead and notices that Zunrun still hasn't regained consciousness yet. He knows that once Zunrun wakes up, he will bind the clones to him and consolidate the Magister's power. But while the Archmage is still incapacitated, Ilinj sees an opportunity. He mercilessly strikes down the unconscious Zunrun, which in turn kills all of the clones and transfers the power of the Magister to him. Ilinj, who now holds this immense power in the palm of his hand, takes a moment to revel in the fact that he is the new Magister. However, back at the Vizier Vanquished, which is now little more than a pile of burning cinders, a local wizard named Belmer of the 6 Thunders arrives on the scene just in time to see the last of the clones die. Belmer was hired as the Firestop mage for the local inn, which means that if the place ever caught fire, he would show up and put a stop to it. And while he was too late to do anything about the destroyed inn, he did notice something. In fact, he recognized the face the clones all shared and realized what was happening. So, Belmer heads back to his home and uncovers his crystal ball in order to scry on Zunrun. He does so just in time to watch Ilinj murder him. As Ilinj stood there gloating, Belmer took this opportunity to try and kill him with a powerful magic spell. It's not specified which spell he cast here, but it was something that could be cast just by seeing the target, and therefore if you were scrying on somebody, you could cast it from a long distance, which is exactly what he did, and it totally worked. So that's Almer, the 9 clones of Zunrun, and Zunrun himself, Zunrun's apprentice Ilinj, and now Belmer, who have all held the title of Magister in less than 10 minutes, bringing our total for the night up to 13. 13. But this is the night of 14 Magisters, so who's our final Archmage of the evening? Turnok Draethar was the son of 2 herbalists. As a young man, he traveled the countryside hoping to become the apprentice of a mage and learn the ways of magic. He was turned away time and time again, basically just being told by everyone he was a talentless hack fraud. Until one night, through an act of kindness, he helped an old man who was too drunk to stay and get home. That man turned out to be a powerful wizard whose name was Belmer. Belmer took Turnok in under his wing and agreed to let him be his apprentice since he had shown him an act of kindness. However, Belmer turned out to be kind of a dick. He was extremely paranoid and went as far as to place a magical tattoo on Turnok's chest that should he ever betray his master, the tattoo would kill him. Over the years, while he did learn a little bit of magic here and there from his master, Turnok came to resent Belmer, and I feel like it's kind of obvious why. He did so with one decisive blow, hoping that if he was fast enough and killed him instantly, Belmer would not have time to activate the tattoo magic and kill Turnok. And his plan almost worked. He did not die instantly, but the flesh surrounding his tattoo began to quickly rot away, and before long, Turnok would be dead if he didn't do something fast. But fortunately for Turnok, the power afforded him by the Magister enabled him to cast an extremely powerful counterspell that was able to slow and eventually stop the necrosis happening on his chest and save his life. And that is the story of how the title Magister passed between 14 different people in a single night. I think this story is hilarious, and it serves as a perfect example of what people mean when they discuss shenanigans that can happen only in D&D. I also love how at the end of the night, this epic battle between all these wizards was resolved by a single blow to the head from an axe. There's just something beautiful about that. This whole situation was such a clusterfuck that Mystra herself actually changed some of the rules surrounding how succession works because of this night. Going forward, any new Magisters beyond Turnok would have magical immunity to spells that would slowly fade over time. This was literally put in place just to prevent anything like this from happening again. One minor detail as well that doesn't really have anything to do with the story itself, but I just think is funny, is that it's in the canon that anytime a new Magister takes on the role, all magic users can feel it. So while there were only a few people who knew exactly what was going on, spellcasters the world over knew something was going down. The right of succession, however, would remain, though it would become much less violent over the years, eventually getting to a point where you could actually become the new Magister by challenging the current one to a test of wits, basically how much information you know about magic, giving you a chance to prove that you know more about magic than they do and thus are more qualified to be the Magister. And I think that is hilarious. I just can't help but imagine that as a bunch of wizards playing Jeopardy, except the prize is untold arcane power and a cool Pope hat. In the wake of all this bullshit, Turnok would go on to become a beloved Magister who took on as many apprentices as he could. All said, he would train over 60 wizards and would hold the title of Magister for an impressive 53 years. At least, until he started to slow down in his old age and was eventually killed by a guy named, I shit you not, Kalden Darthus Salinger. I guess Mr. Salinger was just jealous of his brother's literary success and wanted something cool too, but that is a tale for another time. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Legend Lore, and if there is an obscure piece of D&D history that you want to see me talk about on this show, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, if you're a Magister and you die by tripping over a rock or something, do you think that rock becomes the new Magister?